is, without a doubt, a regulatory part to this. We need to revisit the principles of freedom of expression and understand what they mean in the digital age. Content is not where the battle is anymore. It's about manipulated campaigns and the lack of transparency of the internet. I think we live in a new form of censorship where we don't understand how the information environment around us is shaped. We don't know why an algorithm shows us one piece of content and not another. We don't know which bits of our data are used to target us and why. We don't know if what we're seeing is organic or part of a coordinated campaign. All of this is in the dark. We need to rip off the curtain for the backstage of the internet so that we can see how information is created and why and by whom. And outright deceptive campaigns should be illegal. And by that I don't mean that people telling lies on the internet should go to jail, but massive campaigns organized by troll farms or governments or private companies that are explicitly deceptive and camouflaged should be illegal. Ultimately, we have to at least recognize the scale of the problem. 2 years ago, people were still telling us, well, this isn't really new, people have always lied, politicians have always lied. To still think this way is to totally misunderstand how technology has ripped up the old rule book. This is a new thing, and it needs to be dealt with. So there's a lot here, and I'm just going to let these stories, I've got a couple more, I'm going to let them speak for themselves, because this stuff is really important to kind of internalize. It's, for example, just speaking for myself, I don't see very much pro-Trump, anti-immigrant propaganda online. It just doesn't, it's nowhere that, it doesn't exist anywhere that I go, and it isn't fed to me, by which I mean that it's not what's coming in any of the social media spaces that I inhabit. It's just not there. Why is it not there? That's partly self-selected. I don't go to places that are just going to drive me crazy by telling me ridiculous things that I don't like or I don't agree with. Why would I subject myself to that? So I self-select out any number of kinds of opinion things where people are spouting these kinds of racist or bigoted opinions. I just don't do that. And so that's one way. Another way is that the way these social media platforms work, they look at what you like and what you go to, and they feed you more of that so that you'll keep coming back for more. So between myself and the algorithms that exist out there, we are separating ourselves from this whole segment of society, I guess you could put it. And so when I'm looking to see what other people are saying about things, I have to consciously make the effort to go look for it. If I didn't do that, if I was not concerned about what is being said, what is being considered, what is being expressed by people whose ideologies I vehemently disagree with, I wouldn't know anything about it. You know, if I were the casual user of this stuff, a casual consumer of news and a casual user of the internet, I would think that, well, everybody agrees with me because that's all I see are people that agree with me. So it is really important to understand this. Not everybody that you disagree with is lying or living in a fantasy world or whatever. Some of them have important things to say. They may be wrong. You may think they're wrong. I may think they're wrong. But they're not all lying. So you can't just say, well, I don't read X or Y, or I don't see what they have to say because it's all made up. That's not true. It's not all made up. There is enough reality that exists on all sides of every question that it's important to understand. Let me put it this way. Let me rephrase it. it's important to understand what people are believing so you can understand why they're thinking what they're thinking. The difficulty is figuring out where these beliefs come from, where these facts that people are basing their beliefs on come from, because not all of these facts are actually facts. Some of them are facts, some of them are made up or twisted to such a degree that you can't see the reality for the twist, let's say. So why do I believe what I believe about immigrants? Because I know immigrants. I work with them regularly. I talk to them. I meet them. They are my friends. They're my relatives. They're all sorts of people. So I know immigrants. I know what's going on with certain groups. I work in an organization, CU Immigration Forum, that deals with the problems of immigrants and deals with immigrant issues. So even beyond just my own personal circle of friends, so it's not like, well, yeah, you like all your friends, but even beyond that, I see and or deal with or am aware of what's going on with all sorts of people that I will never meet and will never know personally. So my knowledge of immigrants is based on personal experience. I know enough about immigrants and immigration and how the laws work and what people have to go through, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, to be able to judge what I'm reading when I read news, when I read opinions, et cetera. I can judge what of that is believable and what is twisted or being massaged to make it appear in a different way. That's how I know what to share or what not to share and what to believe and what not to believe, because it's based on personal information. If you don't know immigrants or work with them, and you just maybe see them around and you watch TV or you've read a few articles, then you don't have that information. You don't know how to judge what you're reading. So I can't say there's something wrong with you for not understanding this stuff, but I can say that there is something wrong with your thinking that just because you read it or someone said it to you, that you know enough about it to disagree with someone who has more personal experience. So that's where this stuff gets tricky, and it's important to understand it. You need to know at least a certain amount. You need to have, let me start over again. You need to have at least a certain amount of personal understanding of a topic in order to judge what other people are saying about it. And if you don't, then you need to take what you're hearing with a grain of salt and look for as many different points of view and sort of temper your beliefs based on having seen and read and understood all sorts of different reflections on the certain point before you can say, I know enough about this to have an opinion. And I don't think a lot of people are willing to take the time to do that or really want to do that. Anyway, let me go on because I'm totally going to run out of time here, and I may have to have a part 2 of this, well, actually a part 3 and 4, because it's going to be divided in half. We're already in the second half here. Anyway, so the next article is, Who Will Tell the Truth About the Free Press? Concocting fake news to attract eyeballs is a habitual trick of America's New York Times, and this newspaper suffered a crisis of credibility for its fakery. This is a quote by the Chinese government, who declared this after the Times broke the news this month of a government document detailing the internment of Uyghurs, Kazakhs, and other Muslims in the northwestern region of Xinjiang. Oh boy, I just pressed the wrong button and lost my place. Hold on. Who would have guessed that history had such a perverse development in store for us? As the historian Timothy Snyder has written in the Times, Adolf Hitler and the Nazis came up with the slogan Lügenpresse, translated as lying press, in order to discredit independent journalism. Now the tactic has been laundered through an American president, Donald Trump, who adopted the term fake news as a candidate and has used it hundreds of times in office. That is how, barely a generation after the murder of millions of Jews in Nazi death camps, the term fake news has come to be deployed so brazenly by another repressive regime to act against another minority to cover up the existence of prison camps for hundreds of thousands of Muslims. Mr. Trump surely didn't intend this. He's not a strategic or particularly ideological person. He tends to act instead out of personal or political interest, and often on impulse, based on what he thinks his core supporters in the country or the cable television studios want from him. When he yanks troops out of Syria or pardons war criminals, it's safe to assume he's not thinking about the long-term balance of power in the Middle East or the reputation and morale of the American military. He is maneuvering, as ever, for some perceived immediate political advantage. So it is with his attacks on the news media. Mr. Trump loves the press. He has catered to it and been nurtured by it since he first began inventing himself as a celebrity in the 1970s. But he has needed a way to explain to his followers why there are so many upsetting revelations about incompetent administration officials, broken campaign promises, and Trump family self-dealing. He's now tweeted out the term fake news more than 600 times. When an American president attacks the independent press, despots rush to imitate his example. Dozens of officials around the world, including leaders of other democracies, have used the term since Mr. Trump legitimized it. Why bother to contend with facts when you can instead just pretend they don't exist? That's what the Chinese government did. It simply called the Times report fake, though it was based on the government's own documents, and declared it unworthy of refutation. Following the same Oval Office script, a senior government official in Burundi trotted out fake news to explain why his government was banning the BBC. In Myanmar, where the government is systematically persecuting an ethnic minority, the Rohingya, an official told the Times that the very existence of such a group is fake news. The Russian Foreign Ministry used the image of a big red fake stamp on its website to mark news reports that it does not like. Jordan has introduced a law allowing the government to punish those who publish fake news. Cameroon has actually jailed journalists for publishing fake news. Chad banned social media access nationwide for more than a year, citing fake news. As Shepard Smith, a former Fox News anchor, recently told attendees at the annual dinner of the Committee to Protect Journalists, quote, "Intimidation and vilification of the press is now a global phenomenon. We don't have to look far for evidence of that," end quote. The press needs to be scrutinized. Its mistakes should be called out, its biases analyzed and exposed. But Mr. Trump has licensed a far more dangerous approach. The rise of the epithet fake news as a weapon is occurring at an already perilous moment for the supply of information about the world as it truly is. The financial foundations of an independent press are eroding under the influence of the Internet, which has simultaneously become a global conduit for malicious falsehood. It's harder and harder for anyone to know what stories to believe. A world in which governments and citizens can't agree on a shared set of facts is one in which only the most powerful thrive. The health of democracy in the United States and around the world depends on better answers to this challenge. Rather than making matters worse, politicians should be pursuing those answers. For example, by pressing leading Internet companies to accept responsibility for the roles they have already assumed as the world's leading information publishers. The press has to do its part as well. Trying out here. By committing itself to a forthright accounting of any mistakes, an unending struggle against bias in news, and an uncompromising pursuit of truth. Some American politicians, from Maine to Alabama, have followed Mr. Trump's example, but others have been wise enough to dissent, however cautiously. Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, the majority leader, offered a rare, if tepid, defense of the media in August 2017. "My view is that most news is not fake," he told a Louisville audience. This month, Mr. McConnell went to the Senate floor to highlight the Times reporting on Xinjiang, describing the documents published by the Times as a handbook for this Orwellian campaign to effectively erase a religious and ethnic minority in a region that is supposed to be legally distinct from the rest of China. The capacity of news organizations to produce this kind of journalism and to reach an audience that will listen is contingent and fragile. Mr. Trump shows no sign of seeing this bigger picture, or perhaps of caring about it. So it falls to the rest of us, particularly leaders like Mr. McConnell, to tell the truth about a free press, to proclaim its value in the United States and around the world. I'm going to just quickly read this next bit. How to spot fake news. Fake news is nothing new, but bogus stories can reach more people more quickly via social media than what good old-fashioned viral emails could accomplish in years past. Concern about the phenomena led Facebook and Google to announce that they'll crack down on fake news sites, restricting their ability to garner ad revenue. Perhaps that could dissuade the amount of malarkey online, though news consumers themselves are the best defense against the spread of misinformation. Not all of the misinformation being passed along online is complete fiction, though some of it is. Editorial aside, that was my point just a minute ago. It pays to be aware that when something isn't right, that doesn't mean it's completely wrong. It may just be messed up. Okay. Snopes.com has been exposing false viral claims since the mid-1990s, whether that's a fabricated messages, distortions containing bits of truth, and everything in between. Founder David Mickelson warned in a November 17th article not to lump everything into the fake news category. Quote, "The fictions and fabrications that comprise fake news are but a subset of a larger bad news phenomena, which also encompasses many forms of shoddy, unresearched, error-filled, and deliberately misleading reporting that do a disservice to everyone," he wrote. A lot of these viral claims aren't news at all, but fiction, satire, and efforts to fool readers into thinking they're for real. We've long encouraged readers to be skeptical of viral claims and make good use of the delete key when a chain email hits their inboxes. In December 2007, we launched our Ask Fact Check feature. Fact Check. Ask Fact Check. That's hard to say. Ask Fact Check. Where we answer readers' questions, the vast majority of which concern viral emails, social media memes, and the like. Our first story was about a made-up email that claimed then House Speaker Nancy Pelosi wanted to put a windfall tax on all stock profits of 100% and give the money to, the email claimed, the 12 million illegal immigrants and other unemployed minorities. We called it a malicious fabrication. That's fake news in today's parlance. Okay. In 2008, we tried to get readers to rid their inboxes of this kind of garbage. We described a list of red flags. We called them key characteristics of bogusness that were clear tip-offs that a chain email wasn't legitimate. Among them, an anonymous author, excessive exclamation points, capital letters and misspellings, entreaties that this is not a hoax, and links to sourcing that does not support or completely contradicts the claims being made. Those all still hold true, but fake stories, as in completely made-up news, has grown more sophisticated, often presented on a site designed to look, sort of, like a legitimate news organization. Still, we find it's easy to figure out what's real and what's imaginary if you're armed with some critical thinking and fact-checking tools of the trade. Here's our advice on how to spot a fake. Consider the source. In recent months, we've fact-checked fake news from abcnews.com.co, not the actual URL for ABC News, WTOE5 News, whose About page says it's a, quote, fantasy news website, And the Boston Tribune, whose Contact Us page lists only a Gmail address. Earlier this year, we debunked the claim that the Obamas were buying a vacation home in Dubai, a made-up missive that came from whatdoesitmean.com, which describes itself as one of the top-ranked websites in the world for New World Order, conspiracy theories, and alternative news, and further says on its site that most of what it publishes is fiction. Clearly, some of these sites do provide a fantasy news or satire warning, like WTOE5, which published the bogus headline, Pope Francis shocks the world, endorses Donald Trump for president, releases statement. Others aren't so upfront, like the Boston Tribune, which doesn't provide any information on its mission, staff members, or physical location. Further signs that maybe this site isn't a legitimate news organization. The site, in fact, changed its name from Associated Media Coverage after its work had been debunked by fact-checking organizations. Snopes.com, which has been writing about viral claims and online rumors since the mid-1990s, maintains a list of known fake news websites, several of which have emerged in the past 2 years. 2. Read beyond the headline. If a provocative headline drew your attention, read a little further before you decide to pass along the shocking information. Even in legitimate news stories, the headline doesn't always tell the whole story, but fake news, particularly efforts to be satirical, can include several revealing signs in the text. That abcnews.com.co story that we checked headlined Obama signs executive order banning the Pledge of Allegiance in schools nationwide, went on to quote, Fappy the anti-masturbation dolphin. We have to assume that many readers who asked us whether this viral rumor was true hadn't read the full story. Next, check the author. Another telltale sign of fake news is often the byline. The Pledge of Allegiance story on abcnews.com.co was supposedly written by Jimmy Rustling. Who is he? Well, his author page claims he is a doctor who won 14 Peabody Awards and a handful of Pulitzer Prizes. Pretty impressive if true, but it's not. No one by that name of Rustling has won a Pulitzer or Peabody Award. The photo accompanying Rustling's bio is also displayed on another bogus story on a different site, but this time under the byline Darius Rubix. The Dubai story was written by Sorcha Fall, who is reported to her Western subscribers. The Pope Francis story has no byline at all. Next, what's the support? Many times these bogus stories will cite official or official-sounding sources, but once you look into it, the source doesn't back up the claim. For instance, the Boston Tribune site wrongly claimed that President Obama's mother-in-law was going to get a lifetime government pension for having babysat her granddaughters in the White House, citing the, quote, the Civil Service Retirement Act, and providing a link. But the link to a government benefits website doesn't support the claim at all. The Banning the Pledge story cites the number of an actual executive order. You can look it up. It doesn't have anything to do with the Pledge of Allegiance. Another viral claim we checked a year ago was a graphic purporting to show crime statistics on the percentage of whites killed by blacks and other murder statistics by race. Then presidential candidate Donald Trump retweeted it, telling Fox News commentator Bill O'Reilly that it came from sources that are very credible. But almost every figure in the image was wrong. FBI crime data is publicly available, and the supposed source given for the data, Crime Statistics Bureau, San Francisco, doesn't exist. Recently, we've received several questions about a fake news story on the admittedly satirical site Nevada County Scooper, which wrote that Vice President-elect Mike Pence, in a surprise announcement, credited gay conversion therapy for saving his marriage. Clearly, such a surprise announcement would garner media coverage beyond a website you've never heard of. In fact, if you Google this, the first link that comes up is a Snopes.com article revealing that it is fake news. And finally, check the data. Some false stories aren't completely fake, but rather distortions of real events. These mendacious claims can take a legitimate news story and twist what it says, or even claim that something that happened long ago is related to current events. Since Trump was elected president, we've received many inquiries from readers wanting to know whether Ford had moved car production from Mexico to Ohio because of Trump's election. Readers cited various blog items that quoted from and linked to a CNN Money article titled "Ford Shifts Truck Production from Mexico to Ohio." But that story is from August 2015. Clearly not evidence of Ford making any move due to the outcome of the election. A reminder again to check the support for these claims. One deceptive website didn't credit CNN, but instead took CNN's 2015 story and slapped a new headline and publication date on it, claiming, "Since Donald Trump won the presidency, Ford shifts truck production from Mexico to Ohio." Not only is that a bogus headline, but the deception involves copyright infringement. If this Ford story sounds familiar, that's because the CNN article has been distorted before. In October 2015, Trump wrongly boasted that Ford had changed its plans to build new plants in Mexico and it would instead build a plant in Ohio. Trump took credit for Ford's alleged change of heart and tweeted a link to a story on a blog called Perntly.com, which cited the CNN Money story. But Ford hadn't changed its plans at all, and Trump deserved no credit. In fact, the CNN article was about the transfer of some pickup assembly work from Mexico to Ohio, a move that was announced by Ford in March 2014. The plans for new plants in Mexico were still on, Ford said. Ford has not spoken with Mr. Trump, nor have we made any changes to our plans, Ford said in a statement. Is this some kind of joke? Remember, there is such thing as satire. Normally, it's clearly labeled as such, and sometimes it's even funny. Andy Borowitz has been writing a satirical news column, The Borowitz Report, since 2001, and it has appeared in The New Yorker since 2012, but not everyone gets the jokes. We've fielded several questions on whether Borowitz's work is true. Among the headlines our readers have flagged, Putin appears with Trump in flurry of swing state rallies, and Trump threatens to skip remaining debates if Hillary is there. When we told readers these were satirical columns, some indicated that they suspected the details were far-fetched, but wanted to be sure. And then there's the more debatable forms of satire designed to pull one over on the reader. I got lost. Sorry. Anyway, I ran out of time. I should quit there because I've got no time left. There's more to this, but I may have to get to this next time. Anyway, quickly, you have been listening to CU Immigration here on WRFU LP Urbana 104.5 FM. I really appreciate your tuning in and checking in with us. We will be back. We will be back. And in the meantime, check your news. Please, just check it. And if you don't know of your own knowledge how to judge what you're reading, check a lot of different sources and see how they add up. And don't check just random names out of nowhere. Check names that are familiar, that you've heard of, or news organizations that have a reputation to uphold. And not just one, but several. And see, after reading 4 or 5 stories on a subject, see how they compare. And then you can maybe make a judgment. But until then, maybe not. Anyway, I got to go. See you later. Bye-bye.